The wind howled across the Tejas panhandle like a wounded animal, clawing at the frost-laced boards of Elias Haptornes' barn. It was the kind of night that swallowed sound and hope alike, when even the stars seemed to huddle closer for warmth. Elias, a widower whose hands were more scarred than skin from years of wrestling the land, trudged through knee-deep snow with a lantern swinging at his side. His breath froze in jagged clouds. It was checking the livestock one last time before surrendering to the fireless cabin when a faint whimper cut through the gale, a sound too human to ignore. He swung the lantern low. There, half buried in a drift against the corral fence, lay a child. A girl, no more than 10, her black hair crusted with ice, her buckskin dress stiff as rawhide. Comanche, he knew at once from the beadwork on her moccasins. Her lips were blue, her eyelids fluttering like moth wings. Elias' heart lurched. In these parts, finding a Comanche child alone meant trouble, raiders, soldiers, or worse. But the heel's fingers were already turning the color of ash. He scooped her up without a second thought, her body lighter than a sack of feed, and ran for the barn. In siete, the air smelled of hay and horse sweat. Elias kicked the door shut against the storm and laid the girl on a mound of blankets he kept for calving season. He stoked the small pot-belly stove until it glowed cherry red, then rubbed snow from her cheeks with a calloused thumb. "Stay with me, little one," he muttered, though he wasn't sure she understood English. Her eyes opened, dark, enormous, unafraid, and fixed on him as if memorizing every line of his weathered face. She whispered something in a tongue that rolled like distant thunder. Elias didn't know the words, but he understood the plea. He stripped off her frozen dress, wrapped her in his own wool coat still warm from his body, and pressed a tin cup of lukewarm coffee laced with honey to her lips. She drank greedily, then coughed, her small frame shaking. Elias' mind raced. The nearest town was 20 miles through blizzard. The army post, Siete. And Comanche bands roamed these plains like ghosts. If her people were near, they come looking. If soldiers found her here. He pushed the thought away. First, keep her alive. The rest could wait for dawn. He sat vigil all night, feeding the stove scraps of cedar until the barn glowed like a chapel. The girl, her name, she signed with trembling fingers, was N, little star, curled against his side, her breath steadying. Elias told her about his wife, Clara, who they died birthing their stillborn son 5 winters ago, how the land had taken everything but his stubbornness. How he'd forgotten what it felt like to hold someone who needed him. Little Star listened, her head on his knee, and when she slept, her fingers stayed tangled in his shirt. Down came gray and sullen, the snow still falling in sheets. Elias stepped outside to milk the cow and froze. Tracks. Hundreds of them circled the barn like the rings of a target. Hoof prints, moccasin prints, the drag of land spots. He smelled smoke before he saw it, a thin column rising from the cottonwoods a half-mile off. Comanche. His stomach nodded. They heard stories, scalps, burning homesteads. But Little Star's face flashed in his mind, and he knew running wasn't an option. He barred the barn door with a fence rail, loaded his old Henry rifle, and waited. The girl stirred behind him. "They come," she said in halting English, pointing to the cracks in the wall where light bled through. Elias knelt. "Your father?" She nodded. "He will think you took me." Elias swallowed. "Then we'll show him I didn't. Minutes stretched like hours. Then the door rattled. A voice outside, deep, commanding, called in Comanche. Little Star answered, her voice clear as a bell. The door creaked open on its own. 20 warriors stood in the snow, lances lowered, faces painted black and red. At their head was a man Elias recognized from wanted posters, Quanah Parker, half-white, all legend, his eyes like chipped obsidian. The chief's gaze swept the barn, lingering on the rifle in Elias' hands, then on his daughter wrapped in a white man's coat. Silence stretched taut as bowstring. Elias laid the rifle down, palms open. "I found her freezing," he said slowly. "Kept her warm. That's all." Little Star ran to her father, speaking rapidly, her hands flying. Juana listened, his face unreadable. When she finished, he looked at Elias again, this time not as an enemy, but as a man measuring another's soul. Juana stepped inside. The warriors followed, filling the barn with the smell of horse and sage. Elias' heart hammered, but he didn't flinch. The chief knelt, touched his daughter's cheek, then stood. He spoke in English, accented but clear. My daughter says you gave her your fire, your coat, your name. She says you sang to the spirits for her. Elias hadn't realized they'd been humming Clara's lullaby. "'Sis a child," he said. "Cole don't care what flag you carry." Juana studied him a long moment. Then, to Elias' shock, the chief unslung a buffalo robe from his shoulders, thick, warm, smelling of smoke and prairie, and draped it over Elias. "You gave my heart back to me," Juana said. "Take this. It will not repay, but it will remember." The warriors parted. Outside, the snow had stopped, the world washed clean. Juana lifted Little Star onto his horse, then turned. "The soldiers come soon. They will burn what they find. Leave before the sun is high." Elias nodded, throat tight. Little Star reached down, pressed something into his hand, a tiny beaded pouch. Inside was a single eagle feather. "For your Clara," she whispered. "She watches." They rode away, vanishing into the cottonwoods like smoke. Elias stood in the doorway until the tracks began to fill with new snow. Only then did he realize he was crying. He packed what he could, a mule, the buffalo robe, the feather, and left the homestead to the wind. 3 days later, he reached Fort Sill under a truce flag. The soldiers were baffled, the Comanche had vanished, leaving no trace but stories. Elias never returned to the Panhandle. He settled in the Indian Territory, trading with tribes who remembered the white men who they given warmth without asking payment. Years passed. Children grew. One spring, a young Comanche brave rode into town leading a string of ponies. He sought the man with the eagle feather. Found him outside a modest cabin, teaching a half-Comanche boy to read. The brave dismounted, pressed a folded doeskin into Elias' hands. Inside was a drawing, charcoal on hide, of a barn glowing in a storm, a white man and a small girl beside a stove. Beneath it, in careful English, the night the world remembered kindness. Elias traced the lines with a trembling finger. The boy, his grandson, born to a Kiowa woman they married in his wandering years, asked what it meant. Elias smiled, the first real one in decades. "It means," he said, "that one act of decency can outrun 1,000 bullets. It means the coldest night can birth the warmest dawn." And somewhere, on a vast prairie under a sky wide enough for every tribe, Little Star, now a woman with children of her own, told the story to her fire. How a stranger risked everything for a freezing child. How her father, the great Quanah, carried that lesson to his grave. How the feather still hung in a cabin no blizzard could touch. Because kindness, like snow, covers everything eventually. And beneath it, new life always finds a way to grow.